July 30th, 1864, 4:44 a.m., Petersburg, Virginia. The ground exploded. A column of fire and earth erupted into the sky. 278 Confederate soldiers were instantly vaporized. The blast created a crater 170 feet long, 60 feet wide, and 30 feet deep. The explosion was heard in Richmond, 20 miles away. Union soldiers watched in awe. This was it, the moment they'd been digging toward for 4 weeks. The trap had worked. The Confederate line was shattered. Petersburg was about to fall. And with it, Richmond. And with that, the war would be over. Except none of that happened. 8 minutes after the explosion, Union forces controlled the crater and were poised to break through. 30 minutes later, they were trapped inside it. 2 hours later, they were being slaughtered. This is the story of the crater. How one brilliant plan became the worst Union disaster of 1864, and how 8 minutes of confusion turned certain victory into absolute catastrophe. By summer 1864, the Civil War had been raging for 3 years. Ulysses S. Grant commanded all Union armies. He'd been hammering Robert E. Lee's forces south through Virginia for months. Grant's strategy was brutal but simple. Keep attacking, keep the pressure on, grind Lee's army down through sheer numbers and attrition. Lee retreated into Petersburg, Virginia, a critical railroad hub 25 miles south of Richmond. If Petersburg fell, Richmond would be cut off from supplies. If Richmond fell, the Confederacy was finished. Grant surrounded Petersburg in mid-June, and then nothing happened. Lee's forces dug in, trenches, earthworks, artillery positions, miles of fortifications. The Confederate line was too strong to assault directly. Grant had tried. He'd lost thousands of men in failed attacks. So, the siege began. Both armies dug trenches facing each other, sometimes just 100 yards apart. Snipers picked off anyone careless enough to show their head. Artillery dueled back and forth. Men sweltered in the Virginia summer heat, eating bad food, breathing dust, waiting for something to break the stalemate. Nobody knew it would last 9 months. But one Union regiment, coal miners from Pennsylvania, had an idea. The 48th Pennsylvania Infantry was camped directly opposite a Confederate fort called Elliott's Salient. It was a strong position, high ground, artillery, trenches, impossible to take by frontal assault. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Pleasants looked at that fort and saw something different. Pleasants wasn't a career soldier. Before the war, he'd been a mining engineer. He'd dug tunnels through Pennsylvania coal country for years. He had an idea, a crazy idea. What if they dug a tunnel under the Confederate fort and blew it up? Pleasants brought the plan to his superiors. Most dismissed it as impossible. The distance was too far, over 500 feet of tunnel. The engineering was too complex. The Confederates would hear them digging and collapse the tunnel or attack first. But General Ambrose Burnside, commander of the I-9th Corps, approved it. Burnside had been humiliated at Fredericksburg in 1862. He needed a victory. This was his chance. June 25th, 1864. Pleasants and his men started digging. They worked in shifts, 24 hours a day, using hand tools, picks, shovels, whatever they could scrounge. The army didn't provide proper mining equipment. They had to improvise everything. They used old cracker boxes as wheelbarrows to haul dirt. They fashioned ventilation shafts from scrap wood to keep air flowing. The tunnels stretched forward, 10 feet a day, then 15. The men worked by candlelight in cramped, suffocating darkness. If the tunnel collapsed, they'd be buried alive. If the Confederates discovered them, they'd be trapped underground with no escape. 4 weeks, 511 feet of tunnel. They reached a point directly beneath Elliott's salient. Then they dug 2 lateral galleries, arms extending left and right under the Confederate fortifications, like a giant T underground. July 27th, the tunnel was complete. Now came the dangerous part. They packed it with explosives. 8,000 pounds of gunpowder, 320 kegs, stacked carefully in the lateral galleries. Enough firepower to create an earthquake. The fuse was laid. The plan was set. The attack was scheduled for July 30th. Before dawn, the explosion would create chaos. Union forces would rush through the gap. They'd break the Confederate line. They'd capture the high ground beyond, Cemetery Hill. From there, they could roll up Lee's entire flank and march straight into Petersburg. On paper, it was brilliant. In reality, nothing went according to plan. General Burnside had 15,000 troops ready for the assault. His plan was specific. The 4th Division, a unit of United States colored troops, would lead the charge. They'd been training for weeks. Their orders were clear. Don't stop at the crater. Go around it. Push through. Capture Cemetery Hill. The White divisions would follow and exploit the breakthrough. But the night before the attack, Grant and General George Meade overruled Burnside. They ordered him to send a White division first instead. Their reasoning? If the attack failed and black soldiers were slaughtered leading it, the political fallout would be enormous. Northern newspapers would scream that the army was using black troops as cannon fodder. So Burnside changed the plan at the last minute. He drew straws to decide which White division would go first. Brigadier General James Ledley's 1st Division won. Ledley was a drunk and a coward. His men knew it. His officers knew it. Burnside probably knew it. But the decision was made. Ledley's division had received no special training. They didn't know the plan. They didn't know the terrain. And their commander didn't tell them anything useful. July 30th, 3:30 a.m. The fuse was lit. Nothing happened. Soldiers waited in the darkness. Minutes passed. The fuse had gone out somewhere in the tunnel. Someone had to go back in and relight it. 2 soldiers volunteered. They crawled 500 feet into the tunnel in pitch darkness, found the break, spliced the fuse, and relit it. Then they ran. 4:44 a.m. The ground exploded. The explosion was biblical. Witnesses described a column of earth, fire, and debris rising 200 feet into the air. Bodies, cannons, entire sections of trench, everything just lifted, then rained back down across both lines. 278 Confederate soldiers died instantly. The survivors staggered away from the crater in shock and terror. The Confederate line had a massive hole blown in it. This was the moment. The breakthrough. Union soldiers charged and ran straight into the crater. Nobody told them not to. Ledley certainly hadn't briefed them. The crater was right there in front of them, a massive, smoldering pit. So they jumped in. Hundreds of them, then thousands. This was the first mistake. The moment that doomed everything. The crater wasn't cover. It was a trap. The sides were too steep to climb. The bottom was filled with debris, broken timbers, unexploded gunpowder kegs, and body parts. Men stumbled and fell. Units lost formation. Officers lost control. Meanwhile, the Confederate forces, stunned but not broken, began to recover. Officers rallied their troops. Artillery crews repositioned guns. They looked down into the crater and saw thousands of Union soldiers trapped below them. It was a shooting gallery. Confederate artillery opened fire. Shells rained into the packed mass of Union troops. Men couldn't escape. The sides of the crater were too steep. Trying to climb out meant exposing yourself to rifle fire. Staying inside meant being shelled. Ledley's division panicked. Men tried to surrender. Others tried to flee back to Union lines. Most just hunkered down and waited to die. General Ledley, he was hiding in a bomb-proof shelter behind Union lines, drinking, while his men were slaughtered. Burnside, watching from a distance, sent in more troops. The 4th Division, the trained unit that was supposed to go first, finally got their orders. But by now, the crater was so packed with men that reinforcements couldn't even get through. The 4th Division, the black soldiers, pushed forward anyway. Some made it past the crater. Some actually reached the Confederate trenches. For a few minutes, it looked like they might still salvage the attack. Then the Confederates counterattacked. General William Mahone led a fierce assault. His men charged the crater from 3 sides. Confederate soldiers fought hand-to-hand with Union troops trapped in the pit. Bayonets, rifle butts, close-quarters slaughter. The black soldiers were specifically targeted. Surrendering black soldiers were shot or bayoneted on the spot. By 9:30 a.m., less than 5 hours after the explosion, it was over. Union forces retreated. The attack had failed completely. The Butcher's Bill: 3,798 Union casualties, 1,413 Confederate casualties. The crater became a mass grave. Bodies lay piled in the pit for days in the summer heat before anyone could retrieve them. So, what went wrong? The tunnel worked perfectly. The explosion worked perfectly. The plan, on paper, was brilliant. But 3 decisions destroyed everything. First, Grant and Meade overruling Burnside at the last minute. The division that had trained for the assault didn't go first. The division that went first had no idea what to do. Second, no one told Ledley's men to go around the crater. The entire attack plan depended on speed, rushing through the gap before the Confederates could recover. Instead, thousands of soldiers jumped into the crater and got stuck. Third, Ledley's cowardice. A competent commander on the ground might have salvaged the situation. Ledley hid and drank while his division was massacred. The Union had every advantage: surprise, numerical superiority, a massive breach in the enemy line, and they turned it into one of the worst defeats of the entire war. Grant later called it the saddest affair I have witnessed in this war. A court of inquiry investigated. Ledley was quietly cashiered out of the army. Burnside was blamed and never held another field command. Pleasance, the engineer who'd made the plan work, was ignored. The 4th Division, the black soldiers who'd fought with extraordinary courage, were blamed in some reports for the failure. This was a lie. They'd been sent in as reinforcements into an already lost situation and fought harder than anyone. The war dragged on. Petersburg didn't fall until April 1865, 9 months later. Thousands more men died in the trenches. Think about what this means. The Battle of the Crater wasn't lost because of Confederate strength. It wasn't lost because the plan was bad. It was lost because of 8 minutes of confusion and bad decisions. 8 minutes. That's how long it took for Union soldiers to charge into the crater instead of around it. That's how long it took for the attack to become a disaster instead of a breakthrough. If Ledley had briefed his men, if someone had physically blocked the crater and forced troops to go around it, if the 4th Division had led as originally planned, Petersburg might have fallen in July instead of April. The war might have ended 9 months earlier. Instead, 3,800 men were killed or wounded. Most of them died trapped in a hole in the ground, unable to fight back, unable to escape, just waiting for the next artillery shell or the next Confederate bayonet charge. Military historians study the crater as a perfect example of how not to exploit a breakthrough. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, not because of enemy action, but because of friendly confusion, poor leadership, and last-minute changes to a working plan. The explosion worked. The engineering worked. The courage of the soldiers, especially the 4th Division, was extraordinary, but 8 minutes of chaos erased all of it. Because in war, it doesn't matter how brilliant your plan is if no one executes it. And sometimes the deadliest enemy isn't the one shooting at you, it's the one giving you orders. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment.